Welcome to the CSIR Knowledge Commons. In the unlikely event of an emergency, an alarm will sound throughout the building. Trained responders give instructions on evacuation. Stay calm. Take only belongings you can carry. Walk in an orderly manner. Do not run. Responders will lead you to an emergency exit. Move to the assembly point. Please do not return to the building until it has been declared safe to do so. Emergency evacuation plans are available in all venues. General information. Restrooms are available throughout the building. Please look out for signage. There are designated smoking areas outside the building. Please look out for signage. As this is a public building, please do not leave unattended. For lost property, please contact our reception desk for assistance. Wi-Fi information. Free wireless internet access is available throughout the building. Select Free CSIR KC Wi-Fi on your device. Password available from our audiovisual team. For assistance, please call on any of our staff members who will contact a technician to provide support. Thank you for listening. We trust that you will have a good day with us.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the launch of the Green Book. We really appreciate the time that you have taken today to attend this presentation and demonstration. My name is Wilhelmine van Niekerk. I'm the Green Book Project Manager and I'll also be the Program Director for this morning. I would like to ask our Executive Director for the CSR Built Environment, Dr. Bethwel Sehlapele, to come forward to do the welcoming and introductions.
Good morning, colleagues. Beautiful day, Friday, launching the Green Book. It couldn't have been launched on a better day. On a Friday, we are all relaxed, except myself and a gentleman to the right there in ties. Had I been warned, I would have been a little bit less casual, less formal than I am. However, without much further ado, my role today is to welcome you to the launch of the Green Book. My name is Bethwel Sehlapele. I'm the Executive Director of a unit at the CSIR called the Built Environment. A little bit about the unit. So this unit undertakes research and development in areas around the built environment itself. We do research and development in areas such as water. We look at coastal engineering and port infrastructure research. We look at, and that's where the research around the Green Book is located, spatial planning systems. We look at research, we do research in transport, and so forth and so on. I knew about the Green Book, but I didn't know much until about a week ago when the team enticed me to a meeting. In arriving at that meeting, I didn't know what I was expecting. I thought I was going to be given a book, a presentation about a book as it were. But to my amazement, I found a very complex intricate, well thought tool, software-based tool that can help not only municipalities, but in particular municipalities, to really understand and anticipate what climate change, what effects climate change will have in our lives. And I looked and I listened to the team as they were going through this program, and I must confess, I was blown away. I was blown away by the complexity that the program has. And my understanding of climate change is that it is so complex. And therefore, I have no doubt that given the law of requisite variety, it says that you approach a complex problem with a complex solution. So I have no doubt that the complexity of the Green Book is such that it will be able to greatly assist municipality to really deal with the anticipation of the effects of climate change, and therefore preparing the human settlements and the areas where they have control to be able to adapt to the effects of climate change. And therefore, I would like to welcome you all, and I hope that you are also going to be as excited as I am as the team goes through the demonstration of the Green Book itself. The Green Book, the launch of the Green Book is only but a beginning. The more important part of this journey is how does it get to be implemented, and through the years as we implement it, to see how it really helps municipalities to navigate through the complexities of climate change. Without much further ado, in particular, I would like to welcome the IDRC, International Development Research Center of Canada, and it is represented here by the head of International Cooperation, Jen Cooper. I'd like to welcome you. In particular, a little note about Canada. As I was chatting to Jen, I was saying that it's my alma mater country. I studied my master's at Queen's University, so we were reminiscing about Canada. Secondly, another role player that played an important role in the first phase of the Green Book, the National Disaster Management Center, a very invaluable partner, and we welcome you here as you are represented by the Chief Director, Abe Brewer. I'm aware that there are other partners that are lining up to support the next phase of the Green Book. Notably, again, National Disaster Management Center, we thank you for being there to participate in the second phase. The Department of Environmental Affairs, we note your enthusiasm and your declared support for phase 2, which in my opinion is the real challenge, is the real exciting part of this program, the implementation. Lastly, Santam. It's very rare that in a program like this, you would have the private sector having an interest. And I was briefed a little bit as to what the interest of Santam is, and I think I'm looking forward with excitement on the advice, the role, the uptake, the use of what the Green Book, both phase 1 and phase 2, will entail by Santam. And I hope with Santam's participation in phase 2, it will be a beacon to other private sector participants to join in deriving the benefits and guiding if you like, the implementation of this invaluable tool, the Green Book. Let me also welcome the team, the research team at the Built Environment, led by Dr. Pravesh Deppa. Team, you have done a wonderful job. I did communicate with you how excited and impressed I was with the work of the Green Book in the first phase. So I'm looking forward to engaging with you as we together find a way to manifest what the Green Book is intended to do. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You are all welcome.
Thank you very much, Bethwell. As part of the introduction, I'm going to provide a very brief overview of the Green Book project. And then after myself will be Heidi Brown from the IDRC continuing this introduction. Can you all hear me very well? There at the back. Good. So from evidence and experience, we all know that a growing and urbanizing population places a lot of pressure on infrastructure and service delivery in settlements in South Africa. And when there is not enough attention to these pressing and already existing risks, then these risks undermine the efforts we are making to transform our settlements to spaces of opportunity, of equality, inclusivity, and safety. On top of this, climate change adds to the already existing risks and will put more people in places at risk of injury, loss of lives, and also loss of livelihoods. So there is a great urgency for us to adapt our settlements to the impacts of climate change, to reduce the exposure of our people and places to the climate-related hazards, and also to protect the development gains that many municipalities have already made in terms of economic, social, and environmental sustainability. So there is a lack of urgency to address this, a lack of capacity in many municipalities, but it is clear that it is vital to adapt our cities to the impacts of climate change. The Green Book has as its goal to provide information to municipalities on what these expected climatic changes will be in the future, and also to support municipalities to know what to do about these changes so as to protect the lives of people, the economy, infrastructure, and so on in many of these places. Skip right to the end. So when we first started off with the Green Book, when we did the conceptualization for the Green Book, we had a very specific goal in mind. We wanted to provide a book full of guidelines to all of the municipalities in South Africa to assist them in adapting their settlements to the impacts of climate change. As the project developed, we realized, and as all of the information started to come together, we realized that the depth and the wealth of the information and the data we were holding in our hands were way too complex and deep to present that in a printed copy. And so that is how the Green Book became an online support tool for municipalities. So the Green Book evolved from a book to a website, and what we have today is much better than we originally planned. And that is also due to the collaboration with many partners and due to the inputs by the researchers, the efforts by the researchers. So today we still call it the Green Book, but it is, as I say, it's an online platform and tool to be used by municipalities. The Green Book was a 3-year project. It started in 2016 and its end is nearing. So towards the end of this month, the project is finished. It was co-funded by the Canadians through the International Development Research Centre and the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. The work was done in partnership with the National Disaster Management Center in the Department for Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, and in collaboration with various stakeholders from the private sector, the public sector, NGOs, as well as peer reviewers and consultants. The Green Book research team consisted of more than 50 people from multiple disciplines across the CSIR. And so originally the intention of the Green Book was to lend support to local government, specifically in spatial planning, land use management, urban design, infrastructure development, to adapt settlements to climate change. However, over the past 3 years, as we've been developing this Green Book, our audience have grown much wider. So today it is multidisciplinary, it's multisectoral, and it is intragovernmental. We would like to dedicate this Green Book to the babies born to the researchers in the Green Book over the past 3 years. And those are Ramoa Betswe, Naomi, Liliana, Tulani, Yandiswa, and Harvey. But also to the almost 3 million other South Africans born during the past 3 years. So while we cannot say with certainty what tomorrow will bring, it is our responsibility to plan for it, invest in it, and ensure we all take part in creating a South Africa where our children can prosper. They will live in a future we are creating for them now. May each one of us use this book and its scientific evidence to help shape the future for them, a future where they live in resilient, sustainable, and livable settlements. I would now like to call on Heidi Brown, the Program Officer at the IDRC, to come forward and continue with the introduction. Heidi Brown is the Program Officer and she's based in Ottawa, Canada. She's working with the Climate Change Program, and she has worked on the IDRC's Climate Change Adaptation Programming in Africa since 2007. Heidi has an MSc in Capacity Development and Extension from the University of Guelph. Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you. It's really my great pleasure to be here this morning and to see so many of you out here today. As I was reflecting on this time last year, it was a Canadian winter and I was off on maternity leave, and I was so far away from all my IDRC-related work. And at home I often listen to the radio. I listen to our national broadcaster while I'm cooking or trying to clean up after the kids or do various things around the house or in the car shoveling people around. And there was one evening, I'm sure I was washing the dishes or something, it was snowing outside. And the broadcast spoke in detail about the crisis, the water shortage and the extensive drought being faced in South Africa. And it spoke about this impending potential day zero, and what that could mean for the people in the city, and how it was having impacts on the agriculture in the region nearby. And I was reminded specifically of this project and brought back here to Pretoria, and reminded of the importance of the work that this team was doing. So it's really great to be back on the job and to be working on what we see as incredibly pressing issues today. And it's such an important occasion to be here today for the launch of this Green Book. And it also seems really exciting and fitting to be celebrating International Women's Day here. Congratulations, everybody. And it's fitting because this team includes very inspirational women whose vision, leadership, and dedication has contributed so greatly to the success of this work. As Villamy mentioned, I work as a program officer with Canada's International Development Research Centre, and I had the good fortune of being assigned to oversee the Green Book project. IDRC has for the past 14 years invested over 200 million Canadian dollars in research on climate change, with projects in more than 75 countries around the world. And actually our earliest programming began here in Africa. We had a program called the Climate Change Adaptation Program in Africa, which was co-funded by IDRC and the UK's Department for International Development. And South Africa has always featured very prominently in the research programming that we support. In this country alone, IDRC-supported researchers have looked at how to improve collaboration to tackle flooding in informal settlements in Cape Town, how to reduce the vulnerability of fruit crops in South Africa, to protect jobs, livelihoods in this important economic sector in the country, and tested methodologies to understand vulnerability at the household level, so so that investments to support adaptation could target those most in need. And South African institutions and universities have played a key role in developing the capacity of many young researchers from across Africa, not only within the country and even beyond, through fellowships and leadership programs. Now, why am I going on about IDRC's work on climate change adaptation? It's not only to plug, it's not only to plug the good work that I think my organization is doing, but also to give you some context and some scale for the assessment I'm about to make about this work. So over the years of working with IDRC, I've had the good pleasure of getting to know a number of very innovative and impactful projects and some very bright and talented researchers. And still, from my perspective, this project really stands out. Let me tell you why. It stood out even from the beginning when the team submitted their proposal back in 2015 in response to a competitive call for proposals on cities and climate change adaptation. In fact, you should know that it was the top-ranked proposal from among 150 applications received. So it's no surprise this project has gone on to be incredibly impressive and exceeded the expectations. As it comes to the end of this 3 years of work, this project stands out in many ways, but especially in terms of the who, the how, and the what. Let me explain. So who? You'll hear today from the very committed members of the CSIR team who led this project. But as Wilhelmine mentioned, they also worked in close collaboration with a very large group of researchers, over 50, as she's mentioned, from different disciplinary backgrounds, from various South African institutions. This was clearly a very important collective effort. And how? The team worked in a very collaborative way, not only within their group, but beyond. They reached out to key stakeholders and other relevant specialists in different domains. And I expect some of you are here today because you've been involved and engaged in that process along the way. This was an approach that valued different perspectives and inputs, invited critique, and sought to understand and meet the very real needs of municipalities in this country. And I come back to the how again. They worked hard to meet those needs by developing this tool, by developing data that would be very specific to the local level, and to communicate this information, though complex, as the executive director has mentioned, in a very thoughtful way that would really make sense to city planners and municipal staff. Along the way, the team also responded to requests when the data they had generated, such as downscaled climate projections or detailed information about particular risks, could support other national and local planning efforts. And finally, the what about this project. And of course, we're all here today to learn more about this what, to learn about this green book. So I'm not going to steal the show by speaking in detail about this. But in very simple terms, to me, the research results and this online resource represent a significant scientific and yet practical contribution to South African municipalities as they face the challenges posed by an uncertain and changing climate, today and into the future. And while this 3-year project is drawing to a close, as mentioned, I really look forward to hearing how the plot of this green book unfolds. Because it seems clear to me that this is just the first chapter, and this was already mentioned, that now is the time to take this resource and to move forward. And this will undoubtedly not be simple, because it's one thing to build a tool, and it's another thing to support its use and to see it be implemented. However, my hope is that today many of you present and your institutions that you represent might be an integral part of the story moving forward. And that story would ultimately be about how different actors from across government, civil society, private sector, and research continue to collaborate to support municipalities and to increase the well-being and resilience of South African cities and the millions of girls and boys, women and men that call those cities home. So thank you and all the best as you continue this journey and this important work.
Thank you for these words, Heidi, and it's really been a pleasure working with you over the past 3 years, and we'd love to do so again in the future. I would like to ask Jennifer Cooper to come forward. Jen Cooper is the Head of International Cooperation at the High Commission of Canada to South Africa. And Jennifer has been the Head of Development for Canada and South Africa since 2017. Prior to moving to Pretoria, Jen was based in Kiev in the Ukraine as Deputy Director of the Canadian Development Program there. She's been working on development issues in various capacities for Canada and international organizations since 2000. She's joined here in Pretoria with her husband and 2 boys. Thank you.
Can I take this off? I feel like this is a very large podium and I'm behind it. Thank you very much. It's great to be here. I just have a quick question for Heidi. You mentioned you were pregnant during this project. Is your little one featured among the dedicatees?
No.
What?
They thought about it, but since the project was focused on South Africa, they decided to go that way.
Fair enough.
And we all recognize this as a local talent. They're in the spirit.
In the spirit. Good morning, everyone. I need to start off by offering the regrets of the High Commissioner of Canada, Sandra McCardle, who would have loved to have been here today, but unfortunately had another engagement, so you get me instead. But I am absolutely delighted to be here on International Women's Day. And to share it with you, because many of you probably know that a couple of years ago, Canada launched our Feminist International Assistance Policy. And then maybe you're not so aware, but more recently, we have embarked on a new feminist foreign policy, meaning that we're putting women and girls and the empowerment of women and gender equality at the center of not just our international assistance, but all of our international engagement. Give it up. So Canada's approach is based on our conviction that supporting gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls is the best way to build a more peaceful, more inclusive, and more prosperous world. And the International Development Research Centre is a critical part of this engagement of Canada internationally. IDRC brings together the right partners around opportunities for real impact. It invests in knowledge and innovation to find solutions to drive large-scale positive change. And this partnership with IDRC and CSIR to develop this Green Book is a great example of the very partnership for innovation that is needed to drive that change. It's not that long a speech, don't worry. So again, with today being International Women's Day, I'd like to specifically recognize how this Green Book project stands out as being strongly women-led. It's my understanding that the team includes 30 women, accounting for over half of the research team. The project has also been a fantastic experience for mentoring and nurturing the research talents of 9 young women researchers. And they're working in areas that all sound very, very complex and smart to me. Urban planning, geoinformation sciences, environmental sciences, web development, environmental health, and hydrological engineering. But even more important than having women at the helm and building their capacity, which is of course very, very important, is the fact that this research and the Green Book itself can support decision-making on adaptation approaches that can strengthen resilience and safeguard livelihoods. But this is the most important part. If it is employed in a way that engages women and men, boys and girls, to understand their different needs and vulnerabilities and responds with gender-sensitive adaptation solutions, this research and tool can meaningfully contribute to improving social and gender equity across South African settlements. There's another very important Canadian link to this, which is kind of happenstance, but I think we can turn it into something really very strong. For the last couple of years, Canada has been supporting a project called Building Inclusive and Green Municipalities. Last page. So let me underline the green bit of that project. It's piloting various new approaches within 6 municipalities in Eastern Cape specifically, with the aim to have those municipalities better address inequality and poverty, become stronger economically, and more efficient and resilient to the impacts of climate change. That last piece, the climate change resilience, is where important opportunities come in with this Green Book. Our project will be looking for ways to integrate into their current activities with the communities that they're already in. But let me also take this moment to challenge our partner, SALGA, who I understand is represented here today, I hope, to be a champion of this tool. So SALGA, as I hope all of you know, is the South African Local Government Association. That is our partner for our Big M project. So I would like to challenge SALGA to be a champion of this tool, to make sure that not just the municipalities in our project are using this Green Book, but that all municipalities in South Africa are. To be aware of it and to use it to strengthen their municipal planning and to develop climate resilient settlements. Moreover, that they use it to facilitate the mainstreaming of climate change adaptation into local government planning processes. So in closing, I told you it wasn't very long, let me say that I sincerely hope that there will be broad sharing and application of this great resource that recognizes the challenge climate change presents, as well as the fact that it can impact women and men and other intersectional groups differently. On that note, I wish to congratulate IDRC and CSIR on the official launch of this Green Book, and I also wish you all a marvelous International Women's Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jen. We appreciate your support. I would like to invite Anne Brewer from the National Disaster Management Centre to deliver the keynote address for this morning. The National Disaster Management, as you know by now, is our partner on the project, and Anne is the Chief Director of Disaster Management Legislation, Policy and Compliance Management. She's been with the NDMC for the past 8 years, and in her work, she endeavours to advocate for closer alignment in policy and practice between disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation in the context of sustainable development. Thank you, Anne.
Good morning. Thank you. Okay. Good morning. Yes, I'm also a stand-in on this Women's Day, and I would like to present the apologies of the head of the National Disaster Management Centre, Dr. Mapaka Tau, who is also unfortunately committed elsewhere. So, but it seems to be appropriate to have a woman standing here today, so I'm happy and pleased to be here. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, I would like to start by thanking you for joining this wonderful occasion to celebrate the launch of this milestone event in our endeavours to adapt South African settlements for the future that the changing climate will bring. The future climate of South Africa is generally expected to be characterized by increased temperature and changes in rainfall. The projected increases in frequency and intensity of extreme rainfall, extreme temperature, and extreme weather events are said to affect the poorer communities of our country even more. Extreme events such as floods and hailstorms already threaten settlements in South Africa, especially communities living in informal and semi-formal settlements with limited access to basic services. Settlements located within floodlines are threatened with a higher risk of flooding, while settlements on dolomite face the risk of sinkholes when there is heavy and extreme rain. These events are likely to cause damage to residential, transport and communication infrastructure, which would have knock-on effects on economic development and negatively impact service delivery and sustainable development in areas of greatest need. Water resources will continue to be impacted through climate variability, and for South Africa, which is already climate stressed, and water stress, it is predicted that by 2025, water demand will have outstripped the natural supply of water. Thus, climate variability based on rainfall, coupled with economic and demographic growth projected for towns and cities, will result in many South African settlements facing water scarcity. In addition to these threats, the frequency and intensity of storms are expected to increase with climate change and the South African coastal erosion. So the frequency and intensity of storms are expected to increase with climate change, and the South African coastline will become increasingly vulnerable to storm surges, coastal erosion, sea level rise, and extreme weather events. In an effort to adapt to this expected future, the Green Book is set to become an invaluable online tool to support municipal planning with the development of resilient settlements. The National Disaster Management Centre has been honoured over the last 3 years to be the public sector partner to support this Green Book project, to be involved in the development of appropriate adaptation options for South African settlements at risk, to be the link to policy integration activities, and to share data and analysis on the risk profiles. The NDMC is the custodian of disaster management and disaster risk reduction in South Africa, and has an important role to play in influencing and formulating policy on issues relating to risk reduction. South Africa particularly needs to build the resilience of the poor and those in vulnerable situations, and reduce their exposure and their vulnerability to climate-related extreme events and other economic, social and environmental shocks and disasters. We need to strengthen resilience and adaptive capacity to climate-related hazards and events. In executing its role, the NDMC, together with sector partners across the spheres of government, advocate that resilience, disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation must be part of local government planning, of urban design, of rural development and other strategies and guidelines to achieve sustainable development and reduce disaster risk, including those associated with climate change. According to disaster management legislation in South Africa, municipalities have to develop disaster management plans, conduct risk assessments, and implement risk reduction measures. The Green Book can support compliance to this legislation by providing information that can be used to expand municipal disaster management plans to include risk assessments and risk mapping for functional areas and for areas with vulnerable populations, also by providing adaptation actions to reduce these risks. And I'm quite excited to hear about the project in the Eastern Cape with municipalities, and I really hope that we could ensure that there is integration of these initiatives. The Green Book provides a risk profile of South African settlements based on climate change projections and the settlement typology. The Green Book provides a strong scientific evidence base to local governments to do long-term risk reduction planning, and it enables local government to conduct risk and vulnerability assessments in-house without going at the very expensive route of outsourcing. The Green Book will greatly contribute to the understanding of risk in our South African settlements. It is fundamental in adapting existing and future South African settlements at risk to climate changes. It emboldens integration of risk reduction into land use and planning processes, water resource and environmental management, infrastructural maintenance, design and planning, building design, and construction. This basically emphasizes the complex work that has been done to get us to this point. It is important to increase awareness of risk so that local governments can respond appropriately to decrease the vulnerability to our local communities. So the value of the Green Book is not only in gaining access to the latest scientific knowledge available on risk and vulnerability analysis, it also provides guidance on adaptation options for municipalities. It proposes a suite of climate change adaptation actions with this online tool to show how to integrate and implement adaptation actions. This is for every settlement in South Africa, which is actually quite phenomenal, based on their individual risk profiles. I think this is profound for sustainable development in South African municipalities. The Green Book augments the use of existing planning tools and processes to support local government planning to create resilient settlements. It also addresses a number of planning issues, that is from spatial planning and land use management principles in the face of climate change, to the design of neighborhoods, engineering, economic and ecological infrastructure and services, thus informing sustainable development. Important drivers of change could substantially increase future risk of disasters, notably the increasing frequency of extreme weather events due to climate change. However, choosing adaptation options to reduce these risks presents significant opportunities for policymakers to make informed decisions. It makes clear sense to make full use of these new developments in science and evidence, such as contained in the Green Book. One of the many benefits that have already been realized through the Green Book project is that the capacity of researchers have expanded in the area of disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation and the integration thereof into development. Through a multi-sector approach, content was co-produced and peer-reviewed by a number of stakeholders from all spheres of government, universities, industry and government agencies. Now that the Green Book is launched today, we need to pursue the outcomes that stakeholders involved in risk reduction, climate change adaptation and planning buy into the concept of the Green Book and promote the guidelines and the use of it. That urban planners, environmentalists, disaster managers and engineers are well positioned to apply the guidelines outlined in the Green Book. That human settlement, disaster risk reduction and climate change policy and regulations are influenced by the Green Book. And ultimately, that the application of the guidelines improve the resilience and reduce vulnerability of at-risk populations living in South African settlements. As we are entering into the second phase of the project, the National Disaster Management Centre is excited about the collaboration with more partners, such as Santam and the Department of Environmental Affairs, to achieve these outcomes. The NDMC will continue to share available data and support the rollout of the Green Book into the municipal space by facilitating training and capacity building opportunities of local level officials. The NDMC is well positioned to access various disaster management structures and platforms where the Green Book can be introduced and where policies can be informed across the spheres of government. The first opportunity has already been scheduled to take place in KZN next week, and where the Green Book will be introduced to local government officials in the province. As part of the steering committee that has been established, we agreed to meet soon to unpack the components of Phase 2 of the Green Book and delve into detail regarding to the cooperative partnership. The NDMC is committed to this process, which will include the rollout, identifying critical research and development streams to enhance and fill in knowledge gaps, and continuous inclusion of new research, new data, new findings, and functionality, linking other initiatives, etc. And will continue to support the Green Book through the means at its disposal. I want to take this opportunity to sincerely thank the IDRC, the International Development Research Centre, through both of you, and the CSIR for funding this project, and congratulate the Green Book team, led by the CSIR, especially Wilhelmine van Niekerk, for a job well done. The Green Book online tool ultimately facilitates the mainstreaming of climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction into local government planning. It helps us to know what change to adapt for and how to adapt to this change for climate resilient settlements. Thank you.
Thank you, Anay, for a very optimistic keynote address. It's much appreciated, your personal involvement in the project. has also been appreciated, and we're looking forward to working with you in the next phase of the Green Book project program, as our executive director calls it. I would like to now call on Alice Leroux to come and to give us a presentation on the overview and high-level findings of the Green Book. I'm sure you're all curious by now to know what the Green Book is all about and what it looks like. Alice is a senior researcher with the CSIR Built Environment. She holds a master's in geographical sciences from the University of Utrecht, and she was the technical research coordinator on the Green Book. Big shoes that she filled in a very competent way. Thank you very much, Alice.
Thank you, Wilhelmine. Okay, let's do it like this. So before I'm going to show you some of the results, I'm going to get you guessing for a little bit longer. So allow me just to quickly give you a little bit of a brief background to the program before we get into some of the results. Okay. So Anae would have spoken about this as well. I'm going to reiterate this. In the past 4 decades, South Africa has experienced more than 80 noticeable hydrometeorological disasters. This has affected more than 21 million South Africans and has cost our economy in excess of 74 billion rand. There's currently overwhelming scientific evidence showing us that the intensity and the frequency of these hydrometeorological hazards, particularly those of floods, droughts, wildfires, storms and heat waves, have increased in the past 4 decades, and it will likely continue along this path as current projected climate scenario shows us. There's also strong scientific evidence that supports the current observed urban growth rates in South Africa, and that these urban growth rates in South Africa will continue as urbanization and high population growth increases in the coming decades, placing even more pressure on infrastructure and service delivery. So we also know that municipalities currently are already under enormous and tremendous pressure to address many complex urban challenges, in many cases with limited resources. Some of these persistent and emerging challenges, to name only a few, include things like unaffordable housing, rising inequalities, air pollution, lack of capacity, unplanned expansion, and lack of participatory planning processes. So if we combine more frequent and intense hydrometeorological hazards with a growing urbanizing population, current practices, a growing informal sector, it is very likely that the inherent vulnerabilities of settlements and communities in South Africa will increase, placing more people at risk of climate-induced disasters. But we shouldn't shy away from a population growth that is projected. It can be a catalyst for economic development. We, however, need effective planning and policy interventions that will ensure we adapt our settlements to the anticipated changes expected. This will be a vital piece of the puzzle towards ensuring sustainable and resilient settlements. Okay. So this was exactly the rationale for the Green Book. We said we needed to know what change to adapt for and how to adapt for this change, because this is what is of critical importance to decision makers involved in the planning and design of human settlements. So the ultimate aim of the Green Book is to propose a suite of climate change adaptation actions for every settlement in South Africa based on their individual risk profiles. The Green Book research design is in accordance to the conceptual framework and the definitions as captured in the 5th Assessment Report of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, a framework, an approach, and a set of terminologies that places the concept of disaster risk at its center. So this was the research design of the Green Book. We've spoken about natural hazards and how they interact with vulnerable communities, and where we have exposed infrastructure to these natural hazards, there's a risk. There's a risk of loss of life and a risk to loss of livelihoods and sustainable livelihoods. So we've also spoken about how climate change increases some of these natural hazards in terms of frequency and intensities, development trajectories, sometimes increases the vulnerabilities of communities as well, and then poorly planned development can put even more people and infrastructure at risk of loss of lives. We're saying that the role of adaptation is very important, as it reduces the vulnerability of communities and it lessens the exposure to critical or to the exposure of natural hazards. So to be able to be in accordance, we structured, and the research book specifically was structured into 6 interdisciplinary research streams. These research streams were co-produced quantitative scientific evidence, models, methodologies, frameworks, tools, and datasets. The first research stream focused on downscaling climate projections for 2 RCP scenarios, using 6 representative climate models in each scenario. A series of 16 climate variables such as temperature, rainfall, very hot days, were downscaled for the entire South Africa on an 8x8 square kilometre resolution, making this the highest resolution climate data available for the entire South Africa. The second stream profiled all 1,673 settlements in South Africa in terms of their underlying vulnerabilities. The settlements were profiled based on a series of vulnerability indicators, including indicators such as household socioeconomic status, economic vulnerabilities, physical and environmental vulnerabilities, and service access constraints. The research stream also developed a population potential growth model to forecast settlement growth across South Africa on a resolution of 1 by 1 square kilometre, the first settlement population growth model to be developed in South Africa. The third research stream focused on understanding the current hydrometeorological hazards settlements are faced in South Africa and considered the impact that climate change will have on the frequency and the intensity of hazards such as flooding, drought, wildfires, and coastal flooding. The stream also looked at the impact that the various climate scenarios might have on South Africa's key resources, such as surface and groundwater availability, South Africa's economic production, and the agricultural, forestry, and fishery sectors specifically as a proxy for food security. The evidence, the models, the findings are all captured in the Green Book. The fourth research stream focused on interpreting and combining previous research streams to present or represent risk profiles for each one of the 213 local municipalities in South Africa, giving a holistic municipal view on what climate change and population growth can mean for your municipality and the settlements within. The adaptation action stream focused on developing a range of adaptation actions to support municipalities to be able to respond to the unique risks they face. The final research stream focused on bringing everything together into an online planning support tool featuring interactive story maps, resource documents, frameworks, and tools. I want to stress the point that the research the Green Book specifically is a novel and a very unique undertaking of interdisciplinary and applied research. It combines the expertise of more than 50 researchers covering the fields of climatology, demography, disaster risk sciences, environmental sciences, informatics, urban planning, economics, ecology, architecture, anthropology, hydrology, and statistics. This multidisciplinary nature of the Green Book, combined with the very high resolution scientific evidence produced, makes this one of the most novel, innovative, information-dense research platforms about disaster risk and climate change adaptation on the African continent. The research, and we've spoken about this, really considered a very strong focus on collaboration, engagement, and co-production. We integrated multiple areas of specialized knowledge. We partnered with the NDMC and their mandate to strengthen and cooperate disaster risk reduction among stakeholders. We had multiple stakeholders engagements. We did this for 2 reasons. The first one was to get buy-in from the stakeholders, but also to allow them an opportunity to influence the content that we developed. We also chose representatives from national, provincial, local government, as well as private sector and NGOs. The reference group and the peer reviewers were vital. They were used to make sure that we co-develop research methodologies that are scientifically correct, that we peer review these concepts, that we validate them, and they also helped in supporting the dissemination, the uptake, and the awareness raising of this process. Okay, so now to show you some of the high-level findings, I'm going to take you through a likely 2050 future. I want to stress just the point that this is a low mitigation scenario. So we talk about an RCP 8.5 scenario that is widely considered to be the current trajectory we are on, that captures things like slow GDP growth rates, high energy emissions, and high population growth. This is also just one of the scenarios of the Green Book. So it is one scenario that we can look into the future, and this is the case for why we need policy action. Okay, so we look at the population, South Africa's urban future population, It is expected that we will follow a worldwide trend, experiencing high population growth and urbanization. The current Green Book projections are indicating that between 17 and 22 million more people will be added to the country in the next 3 decades. Currently, we're standing at around 57.5, 57.8 million, and this will increase to between 75 to 80 million people by the year 2050. This vast majority of this growth is to be confined to our cities and towns, pushing our urban population from 38 million to somewhere close to 60 million by the year 2050. If we look at where this growth will take place, we can see that 34% of all of this growth that is expected to happen will take place in Gauteng. We can also see this will be followed by KwaZulu-Natal absorbing about 20% of the growth, and then the Western Cape and the Eastern Cape seeing an additional 20% of this growth. If we look at spatially where these growth are set to happen, we can again see that in absolute numbers of terms, so that's the red color, the redder it is, the more people it is, will be located in our cities, our urban spaces. I also actually want to draw your attention to the areas in blue that you can see. So these are areas that is projected to decrease in population. So we are seeing some of these settlements that will lose people going into the future. If we look at the relative growth of cities, so these are places that I want to focus your attention on. I want to show you, you can typically see the metros, which is that orange color, where they will see a lot of absolute numbers of people moving into these spaces. But there's some of our cities, our secondary cities, our bigger towns, that will see a very big relative growth. Some of them will double or triple in size by the year 2050. To name one example, if we look at Emalahleni, which is just to the east of Tshwane in Gauteng, currently there, or in 2011, the census recorded that they had a population of 135,000 people, and this is said to increase to somewhere to 413,000 people by the year 2050. So this is why these places in purple and orange, we really need to take account of the growth that's going to come. The significant population growth projected should be managed and planned for effectively. This will place an enormous amount of pressure on bulk infrastructure delivery and will have critical implications for people's exposure to hazards. I'm now going to shift your focus to climate. You can see this is quite a simplified version of an RCP 8.5 scenario, but it is a picture that shows what the majority of models are in agreement with. I think the one thing that is clear in all the modeling results is that we'll see drastic temperature changes. Temperature over South Africa interior are projected to rise at about 1.5 to 2 times the global rate of temperature increases. This means we're likely to see a 1 to 2.5 degrees Celsius increase in our southern coastal regions in South Africa. But over our interior regions, and you can see it there on the map, the Northern Capes and the Northwest Limpopo, it is very likely that we may experience and see temperatures above that of 3 degrees Celsius. So these temperature increases will have significant impacts on numerous sectors, specifically the agriculture, water and energy sector. The increased average temperatures are likely to increase the households' demands for cooling as well. So if you combine what is projected in terms of climate with what is projected in terms of population growth, the impact on the energy sector can be quite significant. So some of the first order findings of the Green Book suggest that the direct impact of climate change can be in the vicinity of 38 billion rand in the year 2050. We will also see drastic changes in things like rainfall and drought. The Western Cape is predicted to become much drier going into the future, but there's also areas in South Africa that is said to see more rainfall. So our KwaZulu-Natal and certain parts of the Free State and the Highlands and Lesotho is also said to become wetter. Okay. So what does this mean for settlements in South Africa? So the first map I want to share with you are the settlements that will be at risk of increases in heat stress by 2050. So these are settlements that is exposed to very hot days as well as heat wave days. So some areas like the Limpopo River Basin will see 40 to 60 more very hot days by the year 2050. A very hot day being defined as a day above 35 degrees Celsius. For the northern parts of the Northern Cape and Northwest, these increases are expected to be more than 70 days per year by the year 2050. These changes will impact on human and animal health and comfort, as you can imagine. So currently, you can see all the areas in red and dark orange there. If we look at those, that is about 28% of South Africa's settlements. So we're saying that about 28% of our settlements will be at very high risk of an increase in their exposure to heat stress by 2050. So if we look at drought and what is said to happen to drought, so currently we can look at the map. This is in accordance to what you've seen on the climate map. A lot of settlements predicted to be faced with a high and an extremely high risk of being exposed to more frequent drought. It is projected that about 30% of settlements will be exposed. You can see them there in red. So the places in Cape Town, around Cape Town, the Western Cape, and then also in Limpopo and the Northwest Province. Settlements at risk of increases in urban floods by the year 2050. This follows the trend of the rainfall pattern shifts, where we can see more settlements specifically in the KwaZulu-Natal area, the northern parts of the Eastern Cape, and also the eastern parts of the Free State will be more exposed. We're projecting that around 21% of settlements in South Africa will be under a high and an extremely high risk of increases in urban flooding. If we look at wildfires, the wildland-urban interface, there's around 60% of South Africa's settlements that will be exposed to this high risk. This takes into account what will happen to our very hot days, but also what will happen to our likelihood of fires and the fuel loads going into the future. So I want to focus your attention a little bit on the water story. So if we look at settlements at risk to decreasing water supply, so we've looked here at places that will see a decrease in their water supply, but also places and settlements specifically that will increase in population pressure. I've shown you the spatial map of the settlements that's likely to increase their population. So if we combine these two, we need to know that about 30% of the settlements currently in South Africa that is groundwater dependent will be at risk of groundwater depletion. So we know that there is around 40% of South African settlements that are in some form or another dependent on groundwater. Okay, if we look at the relative change in water supply vulnerability in South Africa, this map shows you the future water supply vulnerability for the local municipalities. We know that South Africa is a water scarce country and that the demand for water is not evenly distributed. It has resulted in a need to store water and to move water around the country to meet the current and the future demands. So as a result, South Africa has a very developed and complex bulk water supply infrastructure system that is capable of moving water from one part of the country to another. What this map shows you, the scenario, is it shows you the municipalities in shades of red where water supply vulnerability is projected to become worse by the year 2050. It takes into account shifting demands for water based on the population growth figures mentioned, as well as the exposure of local municipalities' water supply to climate change. It considers the water supply in the local municipality as part of a regional interconnected bulk water system already. These municipalities that are likely to experience changes in their future water supply vulnerability will be either due to an increasing population growth and water demand, or because of the exposure to climate change impacts, affecting both future demands but also future water supply vulnerability in South Africa. So it looks like a complicated graph, but it makes it actually a bit, it communicates a bit better. So there's more than 75% of the South African local municipalities that is above this tipping point of becoming vulnerable to their water supply. So that will be subjected. You can here see what contributes to that. The right-hand top panel shows you where the municipalities, the bulk of the municipalities are above the tipping point of becoming vulnerable in terms of water supply. And this is because of a growing population, but also because of their exposure to climate risks or in a shifting climate. So the left-hand top quadrant shows you the municipalities that are also above this tipping point. That is only due to population growth. So even though their exposure to climate scenarios will lessen because of the severe population growth that is expected, they will also be above this tipping point. So there are a couple of, a few lucky municipalities where the population is set to decrease as well as the climate exposure, those on the left hand. And then right at the bottom and right hand, we can see where the population is decreasing, even though the climate exposure is increasing. But because of a decrease in population, these municipalities will also be relatively stable. So if we go on to showing you what the pictures that we've developed and the maps that we've developed for the agricultural sector. So in South Africa, we're projecting the Green Book that 68% of the South African local municipalities could be subjected to some degree of loss in the agricultural sector. So climate change associated impacts on the agriculture and forestry sector will differ, obviously significantly across agroclimatic regions, and it is a function of both crop type and the adaptive capacity of the different regions. Overall, it is anticipated that future increases in temperature and evaporation will result in an increase in irrigation demands across the country. So the map shows you areas that are generally most at risk, so in the dark shades of orange and red, that are most at risk of climate impacts. And they are specifically those where the agriculture makes a large contribution to that municipality's GVA and where employment is also making a large contribution. It is areas as well that is expected to see shifts in rainfall as well as shifts in a warming climate. So there's already areas that are starting to emerge in the Western Cape and large parts of the Northern Cape and isolated parts in the KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga and Limpopo. So while the Green Book offers a look into many of these commodities going into the future, and we've covered quite a lot of them, we've decided just to show you one today, which is the story around maize. Because maize is one of the most important field crops produced in South Africa, and it is a staple food of the population. The maize industry is important to the economy, both as an employer, but also as an earner of foreign currency. So we also know that the majority of maize, so 83% to be exact, is produced under dryland conditions, making it specifically vulnerable to periods of drought. So what you can see in this map is areas of suitability for maize production currently in South Africa. And then if we look at a 2050 future, we can see significant shifts. So there are areas that will become more suitable for maize production in the interior areas, but there's also areas towards the northwest, the western parts of the Free State, the northeastern parts of Northern Cape that is becoming less favorable. And we've already seen that and experienced that in the past drought season. So I now quickly want to just show you, so if we combine this growing population with some of the pressures and the increases associated with hydrometeorological hazards, there are a couple of settlements in South Africa that will be under extreme pressure and under extreme stress. So some of these areas, specifically places like Makweng, which is just to the east of Polokwane, even though we're saying that they need to start adapting now, we also need to know that they're already facing a lot of complex issues. We're already seeing high population growth rates, high socioeconomic pressures, and environmental pressures. So high exposure and vulnerability of settlements can transform even the small, slow onset events into disasters. We also need to know that it is normally the marginalized, the vulnerable communities that will feel this by far the most. Okay, so the idea was not to scare you. The idea was to show you settlements that needs to start thinking creatively, settlements that needs to start taking action. We need to start taking strategic action so that we can strategically move the design of adaptation actions, of strategies, of policies into these settlements. So we need to design these settlements in order to protect the life of its occupants and to ensure we have a sustainable and resilient future. It is therefore absolutely vital that we do adaptation planning. Given these risks that I've shown you, there is a great and pressing need for investment in adaptation options and actions in South Africa. Multiple actors are needed. There's multiple role players involved in the design and the building of climate resilient settlements. We need to think transformatively, holistic. We need holistic approaches that can span across municipalities' planning functions and sectors. The risks are unique. They are location specific, so we need response actions and we need adaptation actions that looks at this holistically. We can't afford a one-size-fits-all approach. We need a basket of adaptation options. We need regular maintenance. We need to be proactive around responding through retrofitting and protecting our vulnerable infrastructure. We also need to be aware that much of the infrastructure needed to accommodate the growth that we've shown today haven't been built yet. So this allows an opportunity, a unique opportunity, for building principles of resilience into our systems. How we design, set our policies, finance, govern, and manage these immense challenges will define different futures for different cities. So the settlements and the infrastructure we build today will stick around for the next 3 decades. So we need to future-proof it. We need to create resilient, sustainable, energy-efficient, water-sensitive, hazard-resistant settlements. So for you here today in the audience, the specific roles you represent today, the mandate you are representing here today because of your department, we really need to think about, are our regulatory and our financial frameworks geared towards responding to these projected population growths and climate shifts? And the thought I want to leave you with today is, given your role, what should you do to take action in terms of ensuring a sustainable, resilient future? And what is your role specifically in the adaptation space? Thank you. Okay, we're now going to show you a brief overview of a tool demonstration.
Welcome to the Green Book, Adapting South African Settlements to Climate Change. The Green Book is an online tool to support long-term municipal planning with development of climate-resilient settlements. The Green Book looks forward to the year 2050 by projecting settlement growth combined with quantitative, scientific evidence of the likely impacts that climate change will have on South African towns and cities. Every settlement risk profile is linked to customizable adaptation actions to be considered for integration into local plans and strategies that are to be implemented. The ultimate goal of the Green Book is to contribute to resilient, sustainable, and livable settlements through climate change adaptation. The Green Book is structured into 3 main components. The first component is a series of 11 interactive national story maps. The story map user with an overview of the scientific research findings of the Green Book project. Evidence is provided on the vulnerability of South African local municipalities, settlements and neighbourhoods, urban growth projections for South African settlements, the current South African climate and climatic shifts projected towards 2050, and the implications of these shifts for some of South Africa's hydrometeorological hazards and resources. The user is able to click through to any one of these 11 story maps to learn more about the research methodology, findings, and recommendations, as well as to access the technical reports and interactive datasets. The second component is the Municipal Risk Profile Tool, an interactive tool that grounds the adaptation process in scientific evidence of the risks each local municipality in South Africa is likely to face under a changing climate by 2050. The Risk Profile tool provides temporally dynamic risk profiles for each municipality and its settlements in South Africa. These profiles provide information on vulnerabilities, population projections, exposure to climate hazards, and the impacts of climate change on some of our municipalities' key resources. From the Green Book website, you are able to click through the tool or learn more about it. The third component is the Municipal Adaptation Actions Tool, an interactive platform to support adaptation planning in local municipalities. The Adaptation Actions Tool provides a range of planning and design actions for municipalities to consider to adapt their settlements and environments to the likely impacts of climate change, to climate-proof their settlements, and to reduce their exposure and vulnerability to hazards, and thus the risk for disaster. From the Green Book website, you are able to click through the Adaptation Actions tool, learn more about the tool, or see guidelines on how to select and prioritize adaptation actions. The Green Book also provides information on adaptation planning at a local government level. This includes information on why it is important to plan for climate change, how to deal with uncertainty, and the mechanisms that support climate change adaptation, such as disaster risk reduction, funding mechanisms, capacity building and awareness raising, and monitoring and evaluation. More information is also available on how the Green Book was co-produced with stakeholders and the peer review process that was followed. The Green Book contributes to the climate change adaptation policy environment in South Africa. Here, you can read about this policy environment and the role of the Green Book in it. In addition to the stakeholders and peer reviewers involved in the project, close to 50 researchers contributed to the Green Book. The research team is made up of researchers from multiple domains and disciplines. You're able to meet this multidisciplinary team here. The Green Book has produced a number of written resource documents. You are able to access research reports, presentations, and papers here. Useful citations are also provided should you need to reference the Green Book resources and tools. You can also click through our funders and partners page to learn more about the organizations that funded the project, our collaborative partner, and project consultants. Now, let's delve into the detail of each of the 3 research components of the Green Book. Through the use of 11 story maps, users of the Green Book are provided with an overview of the research methods and evidence that explain the anticipated impacts of a changing climate and growing urban population on settlements and key resources of South Africa. Story maps are structured in a similar way with sections on background information, methodology, findings on the current situation, findings on future impacts, settlements impact, as well as recommendations. We will take a closer look at the climate change story map. By scrolling down, the story map takes you through a narrative about climate change in South Africa, explaining changes to the future climate of South Africa up to 2050 as projected by the Green Book. There are static as well as interactive maps. You can tell if a map is interactive by looking at the bottom right corner. Here, interactive maps have buttons that allow you to fully explore the map's functionality. By clicking on the Explore icon in the bottom right corner, you can zoom in on any place to see more detail. Some maps even allow you to explore the data further and show additional place-specific information by clicking on a feature on the map. When 3 comparative interactive maps are placed side by side, their visual extents can be synchronized so they can be directly compared when exploring the maps. To select the map that will synchronize the view, click the circular arrow icon at the top of the map. Zooming in and out of the selected map will automatically apply the same zoom and pan action to the other 2 maps. When you are done exploring a story map, you can navigate to the Green Book homepage by clicking on the Green Book icon in the top left corner. From here, you can navigate to any of the other tools. We will now show the functionality of the Risk Profile tool in more detail. Once in the Risk Profile tool, you can select any municipality you are interested in by clicking on the map if you know its location, or through the name search function. We will use Untitled local municipality in KwaZulu-Natal province as an example. On the left of the screen, you can navigate to specific sections of the Risk Profile tool, or you can simply scroll down through each of the sections. The local municipal comparative vulnerability indicators are shown first. You can view municipalities' performance in comparison to other local municipalities in the country, or in comparison to other local municipalities in the province. There are 4 vulnerability indicators: hover over any one for a brief description about how it was derived and what it entails. You can then click on any indicator to see the municipality's recent 2011 vulnerability score or its 1996 score, with an arrow indicating whether the municipality's vulnerability has improved or worsened during those 15 years. You can also download the entire country's vulnerability indicator data on municipal level here. Another functionality of the risk tool is that you can toggle between the present and a 2050 future at any time. By selecting a 2050 future here, you will be able to see the population growth projections for Untitled local municipality for both a medium growth and high growth scenario. For example, the Green Book projects that Untitled local municipality's population may double in size by 2050. Remaining in the future, but scrolling down to the next section, you can see population growth projections for all the towns and cities within the local municipality, such as Sikalesinkosi, Impangeni, and Richards Bay. For example, the table indicates that most of the settlements within this municipality will experience extreme growth pressure. Going back to the current view, you can compare 6 current vulnerability indicators for these same settlements. You can toggle the settlements on and off, explore individual scores for each settlement, or view the map to spatially locate the settlement within the municipality. The next section shows the current climate features of the municipality. You can click anywhere on these maps to see the exact values for any location. And the transparency of the map can also be set to reveal the locational information below. You can also link through to the series of story maps explaining the information contained in a section. The 2050 view provides projections about the anticipated shifts in the climate for the local municipality. These values show change above or below the current baseline climate. For example, when choosing the very hot days, the interactive map will display the projected change in very hot days and the range of uncertainty from 12 modelling outputs. The next section in the risk profile tool provides information on the current and future risk of hydrometeorological hazards per municipality. Clicking on any of the solid icons will show a map with a current hazard index. Selecting the future view opens up the 2050 hazard, showing the likely shift in this hazard, as well as its impact on the settlements within the municipality. You can close the maps in the top right corner and select a different hazard to view. The impact of climate change on various resources by 2050 is covered in the next section. Under the current view, an overview of the municipality's resources is shown with regards to surface water, groundwater, water supply, all economic sectors, and the agriculture, forestry and fisheries sector specifically. By clicking on any of the icons, more information will be displayed. For example, clicking on agriculture, forestry and fisheries, the 3 main contributing commodities in this sector and their current contribution to the local municipal GVA and employment, as well as its contribution to the national GVA, are shown. In the 2050 view, you will again see the main contributing commodities in this sector, but also the impact climate change may have on each of these commodities. Under the 2050 view, additional icons are displayed. Clicking on any of these will provide you with a short, qualitative description of possible impacts on those sectors. In order to effectively and appropriately respond to the risks and hazards showcased, you can click through the Adaptation Actions tool that provides a range of planning and design actions to be integrated into the local planning function. You can view the range of adaptation actions as well as link through to the Adaptation Support page here. In the Adaptation Actions tool, you can view all of the adaptation actions contained in the tool, or filter for actions associated to specific hazards and climate impacts as per the risk profile. You can furthermore also filter according to planning function or adaptation strategy. A short definition of the different adaptation strategies is provided by hovering over the information tooltip. For example, If you filter the lists of actions for coastal flooding under hazards and climate impacts, or for environmental planning under planning function, a number of actions are proposed. By hovering on any of the adaptation actions, a short description is provided. When you click on an action, for example, maintain and rehabilitate dunes, detailed information is provided, which include a description, goals, benefits and co-benefits, costs and implications, an example of where similar adaptation measures have been taken, credits and links where they are available. On the right hand side, you can see the classification of the action as a planning function, adaptation strategy, and the climate hazards and impacts it addresses. Supporting actions, meaning associated adaptation actions that reinforces this action, are also suggested. In this case, the supporting actions are to determine coastal management lines, protect coastal dunes from development, enforce coastal management lines, and construct coastal protection measures. If you click on any of these supporting actions, it will open in a separate tab where similar information will be provided. On the far left panel, you can link through to more information about the Adaptation Actions tool and find a guideline for selecting and prioritizing adaptation actions. With the evidence and planning support provided by the Green Book, we trust that local municipalities will be able to plan for current needs, as well as to prioritize interventions to adapt their settlements to future climatic changes through effective forward planning. Go ahead and explore the Green Book, its resources and its tools. And please reach out to the Green Book team with your feedback, as we would like to continue improving and expanding the Green Book into the future.
Invite you to continue to look at it, to investigate, to use it, to play with it, and to reach out to us.
We have now planned, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, that doesn't often happen, but we've planned a 10-minute break. It's just for those who want to stretch their legs or make a phone call. For those who don't, you're welcome to remain in the room. Can I ask you to please be back by 11:15, and then we continue with the program. Thank you.
It will just be about 45 minutes, and then we'll have a light lunch and more refreshments. So it's not long now. Thank you. Okay, I would like to just say a few things on what we see as the strategic value and impact of the Green Book, also going forward into the next phase. And if you would like to join the conversation, these are the CSR social media platforms, and the handle is Green Book. Many people have apparently already joined the conversation, but please, if you want to say anything about the Green Book, especially if you want to say something about the value and the impact of the Green Book that you foresee, please enlighten us on your views. So just to recap and just to summarize, the aim of the Green Book is to support long-term municipal planning with the development of climate-resilient cities. And our objectives to do this is by providing scientific evidence of a likely 2050 future. And this is based on projected climatic changes and the extent and implications of climate-related hazards on South African settlements and key resources. Also by providing risk and vulnerability indicator trends to enable municipalities to do risk and vulnerability assessments. By providing a range of planning and design actions to be considered by municipalities for inclusion into the existing planning tools and strategies and processes, so as to reduce the exposure to hazards and contribute to livable and resilient settlements in South Africa. Also by influencing national policy on adapting settlements to climate change, and lastly by capacity building, by training and educating students, researchers, professionals, officials in local and national government departments on achieving all of these mentioned objectives. So the Green Book has already contributed to a number of frameworks, initiatives, strategies, and so on of other projects. And I'll briefly mention a few of them, but the following points are according to our objectives, the value that we see in the Green Book. And these are just a number that we think would be of interest to our audience today, but there are many more, and you're welcome to participate in that discussion. So the use of the climate change projections, and downscale climate change projections, have already been used as input in, for example, the climate change, the Gauteng climate change strategy, as well as the draft National Spatial Development Framework of 2018. Likewise, the population growth projections that Ali showed, together with the output of the settlement growth modeling, was also used as input for the draft National Spatial Development Framework of 2018. Then we've developed and tested these risk profiles for a local municipality, the Steve Tshwete municipality in Mpumalanga, as part of an ICLI project, who is one of our collaborators on this project. And we've also developed risk profiles for all 9 provinces in South Africa, and these risk profiles are available on our website. You will see them there under resources. Then we foresee that the evidence and the proposed adaptation actions in the Green Book can assist with the prioritization of interventions by local government in combating climate change and climate-proofing their cities and building resilience. We also can see that the evidence and the trend analyses can assist the national government to identify and prioritize disaster risk reduction, coordination and support in the municipalities most at risk to climate change and extreme events and hazards in South Africa. Then the climate change adaptation has much in common with planning practice like land use management, spatial planning and urban design. So there are many links and overlaps between urban planning and climate change adaptation. The Green Book, we see that the Green Book has the potential to increase the climate awareness of spatial planners and spatial planning in local municipalities, as well as the capacity to manage climate change. It also has the potential to inform land use planning and applications of the long-term risk and vulnerability of certain places within settlements. And when changes to land uses are considered, that the Green Book will have a role to play in that. It also has the potential to complement existing planning guidelines, such as the Neighbourhood Planning and Design Guide, or commonly known as the Red Book, which has just been completed by the CSIR and the Department of Human Settlements, and it will be available very soon. Then also it has the potential to inform decision-making at settlement level about the types and the level of services to be provided, given the expected climatic changes and the impact that hazards may have on settlements. And I think in particular, the role of water in that. Then it also has the potential to promote building regulations and codes that are realistic and risk compliant, and that are also enforced in all parts of our settlements in South Africa. In terms of policy implications, the Green Book already supports existing policy, namely the Climate Change Bill, the National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy, the SPLUMA, the Disaster Management Act, as well as DST's Global Change Grant Challenge Program. But we also foresee that the Green Book has potential implications for policy. For example, the research suggests the need to take ambitious and urgent action to reduce greenhouse gases, to mitigate more severe impacts of future climatic changes. It also advocates for the greater urgency to implement the informal settlements upgrading program in South Africa, because extreme events and temperatures will make shack dwelling unlivable. It furthermore addresses future food and water security issues in settlements. It incentivizes for adaptation. And then also, again, the enforcement of planning regulation and building codes and regulations. In terms of capacity building, research and training, the value of the Green Book lies in the coming together of an interdisciplinary team of researchers and their findings to produce very technical results, but packaged in a comprehensible way that is of great value to the public and private sector. Also, between the data from modeling, forecastings, projections, and indicators, a bridge was built to produce information, conclusions and recommendations that are actually implementable. And then the capacity of researchers in various disciplines, most of them women, have increased in areas of climate change and climate change adaptation. Another value that we see is the co-creation of methods and knowledge through collaboration and consultation. You've heard a lot about that today. And then lastly, the Green Book is rich in data that could be mined on and that also could be built upon. And we just want to iterate that the Green Book is open access tool available on the website for anybody to access. And there is also some data sheets available on that is downloadable for people to mine and to build further upon. I would like to now call Amy Pieterse. She's a researcher with the CSIR Built Environment. She's busy with her master's in urban planning from the from the University of Pretoria, the Department of Town and Regional Planning. And Amy is the Green Book project coordinator, a very efficient one to say that, as you can see. And she will now invite the other speakers that will participate as part of the Phase 2 opportunities discussion. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, everybody. So we've now concluded phase 1 of the Green Book, and you've seen the capabilities and what we've produced over the last 3 years. And now I want to tell you about phase 2. In phase 1, the initial expectations have been surpassed, and the research outputs and findings, the impact that has already been made, and there's still impact to be made. So, but within phase 2, we want to continue to do more about this. Phase 2 will be executed through a phased approach where we will address a few specific objectives. And in our executive director's welcome and in Anne Briva's keynote, they mentioned the phase 2, but now I'll give you a bit more detail about exactly what we are planning for phase 2. So we will identify and address research gaps and needs within the scope of the Green Book. We will roll out the Green Book by building capacity within national departments to be able to support local government with risk, vulnerability and adaptation, and to build capacity within local government to conduct risk and vulnerability assessments. And we will start by prioritizing high-risk municipalities in South Africa. We will also undertake maintaining and updating the website and the tools as new information and data and research becomes available, be it through the Green Book, partners or other stakeholders. In addition to this, we will continue to disseminate research and findings through presentations, publications, lectures, and very importantly, we will continue to engage with stakeholders and role players. Phase 2 will be done in partnership with the Department of Environmental Affairs, SANTAM, the CSIR, and the National Disaster Management Center. The partnership has been set up because of the unique role each member in the disaster and risk adaptation space. DIA, as the body that has the mandate over climate change adaptation in South Africa, the Climate Change Bill, the Climate Change Adaptation Strategy sits with them. And SANTAM as the role in municipal risk reduction, municipal capacity building, and their shared social value contribution. The CSIR as R&D partner, able to do cross-disciplinary research and innovation, and the NDMC with regards to their role in disaster management and risk reduction and strengthening the cooperation among stakeholders in disaster management. I will now hand over to two of our partners to say a few words about their involvement in this exciting new partnership. First up is Lindelani Mudau. He's the Director in Climate Change Adaptation at the Department of Environmental Affairs, and previously was the Director of Coastal Conservation Strategies at DIA, Oceans and Coasts. He led the development of a national coastal management program in South Africa and initiated the concept on national coastal climate change adaptation. He has a Master's in Environmental Management from Stellenbosch University.
Thank you, Emmy. He's also a father. All right, thank you so much, and morning once again, colleagues. Actually, DIA is not only a partner, but a permanent friend and reliable friend in the climate adaptation space. Yes, indeed, we are actually having a zero chances of neglecting this child or the stepchild Green Book. We are bound to adopt this child forever. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to have this opportunity as DIA to share the message of support and to highlight the areas of understanding and opportunities. Firstly, let me thank CSIR for your tireless commitment in realization of the vision of this novel and unique tool, particularly in the work done on stakeholders' engagements, peer reviews. I've been told that about or more than 50 researchers, they've worked in this project. And the 50 researchers from a different domain. We really appreciate that. It's so amazing, it's so exciting, and a good story to tell. Ladies and gentlemen, climate change has become a reality much faster than a scenario predicted. You saw the prediction, but climate change is a reality. It shows, it proves that climate change is something that is happening. Climate change is not just environmental issues, as too many people still believe that these are environmental issues and still need to be dealt by environmental people or practitioners. Climate change is an all-encompassing threat to the very ground of millions people live on and to the global economy. We are now at a point where even the last government has given up denying this reality, the US. Storms, droughts, and sea level rising are bleak signs of what we are facing today. Ladies and gentlemen, DIA believes that the Green Book will provide an alternate adaptation action and solution that can be taken by local government to support the climate change resilience development with those priority areas that are vulnerable to climate change identified on the demonstrations. In pro-supporting of this initiative, DIA is running, or we are running, the Let's Respond tool. This is a tool used at the very beginning of the municipality planning process to develop the climate change integration plan. It is with this understanding that Let's Respond tool need to be aligned with the Green Book for its effectiveness in climate change, in climate risk profiling, and in capacitating the local government. Lastly but not least, DIA is coordinating the local government program purposed to support municipalities in the implementation of climate change adaptation response through establishment of the provincial and municipal institutional structure and communication systems. We believe that these existing structures, platforms, and systems will assist in the successful rolling out of the Green Book tool to all provinces and municipalities. I would also like to assure you all that as a government, indeed, we are resilient, we are committed, we are resourceful to curb the effects of climate change, but with your maximum support. I thank you. Ndoliwe.
Thank you, Lendelani. And thank you for DIA's commitment and support to the Green Book. They've been involved since the start in reference groups, in stakeholder engagements, and we really value their support of the Green Book. Next up is John Lomberg. John is the head of stakeholder relations and corporate social investment at Santam. He completed undergraduate and postgraduate studies at the University of the Western Cape, Stellenbosch University, and Milton Keynes in Scotland. He has over 30 years' experience in the insurance industry. Thank you, John.
Thank you. My brief was very clear. Be brief, be bright, and be gone. I intend to do exactly that, and not to delay because I believe I'm sitting between yourself and lunch. Yeah, Amy? Yes, I'll do exactly that. Yes, I'm going to be talking a little bit about insurance, and I want to quote from the CEO of Willis, who said the following. He said, "Without insurance, nothing is built. Nothing or nobody works. Nothing floats. Nothing runs. Nothing ships. It rebuilds lives, cities, and companies. The World Trade Center would not have been rebuilt if it was not for the insurance industry, which pumped 4.4 billion in rebuilding it." Hurricane Harvey cost or led to a losses of between 15 and 40 billion rands, $billion rather. Hurricane Irma, between 18 and 35 billion dollars. The recent Knysna fires led to a loss, insurance loss of over 2 billion rands. California fires led to a loss of between 6 and 8 billion, and the recent floods in Durban and Gauteng led to a loss of 1.5 billion rands. What does it tell you? It says that there's a role for insurance to play in this space. That's why we are here. Because insurance serves as an economic buffer. It helps build and rebuild cities, companies, and people's lives. Worldwide, catastrophic events led to a loss of over 11,000 people's lives lost. Some went missing, and millions have been left homeless. In South Africa in particular, insurance losses during 2017 were the highest ever recorded, driven by these fires in Knysna, the floods in Durban and Gauteng. The total claims to Santam in particular was around 1.5 billion, as I indicated. there is no doubt that many lives would have been irreparably ruined if it was not for the insurance industry. And Santam being at the forefront, we've paid about 19 billion rands in 2017 in insurance losses, total. The catastrophic events plus other related insurance events. So South Africa is no longer a low-risk catastrophic or catastrophe country. Fires and floods are the source of most disaster-related claims in the short-term industry. And 2017 were the highest ever recorded insurance loss year in the history of South Africa. So due to this fact, disaster management we've seen is mainly the domain of government. Municipalities are at the forefront and are the first line of defense against these catastrophes. It is also true that many municipalities typically face resource constraints. They are hampered by limited budgets, uncontrolled urbanization, and ever-increasing scale of natural disasters. And in some instances, some municipalities simply lack the expertise to manage disasters. And that's why this Green Book is such a valuable tool for us in the insurance industry and also, I believe, for government. We had the pleasure of having the Minister, Dr. Willem Kiese, at Santam on the 21st for breakfast. And we discussed this very issue. How do we forge multidisciplinary, multi-sectorial partnerships to help address this challenge that's bearing down on municipalities? We're putting our hand up to be part of this and be part of the phase 2 implementation. We started this work with municipalities in 2010, where we adopted 5 municipalities. We're currently supporting 43 municipalities. Our target is 53 by end of 2020. But we just starting this journey. So this scientific tool, this platform, will enable us to do even more. We're also working hard to bring along the insurance industry, not just Santam, but other corporates, the insurance industry as a whole, so that we can hold hands and support this initiative. So we hope that the start of this journey will be a significant one, and it will be a game changer, I believe, in the management of disasters. So we're very excited to be part of this, and we look forward to walking this road with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that commitment from Santam and Dia, and also earlier on from the NDMC. I would like to now ask Dr. Pravesh Deba, who is the Competence Area Manager of the CSR Built Environment, to come forward to do the acknowledgements and closing remarks. Pravesh is the Competence Area Manager for the Spatial Planning and Systems. He's our boss. And he holds a PhD in Statistics from the University of Wageningen. Thank you, Pravesh.
Thanks, Wilhelmine, and thanks, team. I think before I start, from what everyone has seen, I think we need to really give them a round of applause. The team has done an exceptional job, and we are all very, very proud of them. So with such a large team and multidisciplinary team, we are bound to forget some people. So while we're going to do the acknowledgements and things like that, please take note that there must have been a lot more that have been involved, even in conversations, through telephone, emails, and so on, that might not be reflected here. But we do acknowledge everyone for all the work that has been put in. So firstly, a project will never happen if there's no funding. And this particular project, we were lucky to have 2 fundings, as Wilhelmine had pointed out. Firstly, it was from IDRC. So we are very, very grateful to the IDRC for the funding that was received. And then secondly, we also received internal funding, which is a competitive funding within CSR. So just like how Heidi mentioned that this project was rated #1 out of 150 projects, similarly in CSR, this project was the top project as well for the thematic call that was being made in 2016, if I remember correctly. And through the two funding, the work was done. And it was very important to receive both funding because the IDRC funding took care a lot more on the running costs, and we needed funding more for the manpower cost. So the SRP funding was very appropriate for that. So it was both IDRC and CSR that contributed in terms of the funding. And the research team that was involved, so you can read the names. I'm not going to read the 50 researchers or so that is here. But like it was mentioned, there's probably 30 females within this 50. So that's 60% females, which I'm not surprised because in our group in spatial planning, we do have around about 60% females. So it was quite appropriate to have a project which also represents the proportion in the group as well. But just to mention, okay, I'm a statistician, so I look at numbers. So just to mention, if you look at the program as well, there's 10 speakers here, and I'm number 4 of the 4 males out of the 10 speakers. So again, it's 40-60 here. So somehow they designed everything according to this. Okay, the one thing that I think that is also important that Philomene touched on, but I think, you know, I want to also just mention, is that we touched on the name, the Green Book. So most people would think it's a book, but actually it's a tool. And she's given you the reasons as to why it is a tool rather than a book. But maybe I should go a little bit prior to that, when we first had a discussion, which Tinus Kriya was leading the discussion. And I think at that stage, we decided that we want to submit a project to the IDRC, which is related to climate change, which is related to our area in spatial planning. And it stemmed from actually the Red Book. And I think Philomene quite ideally positioned it with Tinus so that, you know, she can win it by saying, okay, let's have a Green Book in line with the Red Book. But it is one section within the Red Book that was expanded to do the risk, vulnerability, the adaptations in terms of climate change on human settlements, and so the planning and design as well. So that was where all of this started. Aside from just a large team that worked on it, so the technical team, we also had a large reference group. Again, you can read the names for the reference group, but it included organizations like SALGA, UCT, Wits University, Rhodes University, DPME, Western Cape Province, University of Pretoria, ICLEI Africa, Western Cape Province, South Africa Cities Network, Conservation South Africa, and DIA. Many of the people are being representative in this audience as well. So thanks very much to the reference group. And it was also mentioned that the entire Green Book went through a peer review as well. And we had people from City of Cape Town, Conservation South Africa, Department, COCTA, DIA, DST, DBSA, ICLI Africa, the National Disaster Management Center, Rhodes University, South African Cities Network, SALGA, Stellenbosch University, the Presidency, UCT, University of Pretoria, Western Cape Province, and Wits University. So you can see the project was well defined, well reviewed, and the work that that has been done and is presented, has went through intellectual scrutiny as well. We've also involved a lot of stakeholders, and again, City of Cape Town, City of Tshwane, Conservation South Africa, COCTA, DIA, Department of Rural Development and Land Reform, DST, DBSA, ICLI Africa, the National Disaster Management Center, National Treasury, South African Cities Network, South African Environmental Observation Network, SEON, South African Insurance Association, South African Local Government Association, SALGA, and Technical University Delft. There were also consultants that was involved as well. So we thank everyone for all the input to the Green Book, and we also are looking forward to the second phase as well, and we thank Dia and Santam for being on board to for us to at least start a discussion on the second phase. So with that, I think I don't have anything else to say, but all the best to the team, and thank you very much for everyone that has attended. Our special guest that has made it all the way from Canada, and also our guests from DIA and Santam and all the other organizations as well. Thank you very much for being here.
Right, so you've been thanked for your attendance. We also want to welcome your comments and feedback on all that you have seen and heard, especially once you've tried out the Green Book website and the tools. And we are also open to ideas for future collaborative projects. So please contact us. Our contact details are also on the website. So you are welcome to contact us or leave a message, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. We have planned a lunch. We had to get permission practically from the president of the country himself, but we did, and we can offer you some finger lunch. So I invite you to join us for some networking opportunity and to have some refreshments. I would just like to ask anybody from the media, if you have questions, to stay behind for a very brief Q&A session, and then we'll also join the rest of you. Thank you very much, and safe journey back home.